And our program guest this morning is the Shadow Treasurer, Joe Hockey. But first, we'll see what the Sunday papers are covering around the country. And the Melbourne Age, in the run-up to the Victorian election, goes with the headline Crime Shock. And Andrew Bolt, it's not exactly as you'd expect. It suggests that the news is not as bad as the politicians and the media suggest it is.
Well, I think the Age is really playing a bit fast and loose here with the facts. It says that the crime rate has gone down, so why are we having a law and order election? But the fact is that assault rates have increased until at least last year. The Age says, well, then in the City of Melbourne it's gone down. Well, that's only the City of Melbourne.
Yeah, but what they say is down 14% over the last 12 months, 27% over the last 3 months. So
yeah,
something's
that's only
working.
in the City of Melbourne after a blitz, right? So it doesn't include on the trains and all this. Now, people, when they think of crime, are more worried about being bashed on their trains, or their kids being bashed on the trains or in the streets, or just walking home, or walking from the McDonald's, as happened the other day, and being bashed than they are about their car being broken into. That's the crime that really worries them. And I think this is just a sad way to try and deprecate what in fact is a live issue. And I'd like people to ask themselves, do they trust what all the politicians are agreeing is a problem and what they themselves think is a problem, or do they trust at a front page of the Age?
But isn't the point that they're saying don't get hysterical about it, just keep it in context?
Yeah, but we've been told this for so long in Victoria. Oh, we're the safest state, don't worry, don't worry, don't worry. We now know that the crime rate stats have been dodged up at times, they've been under criticism from various quarters, and we also know in our gut feeling, we see the stories of people being bashed and killed in all sorts of ways by people iced up or drunk or whatever. I think it's a genuine issue, and it's time to take it seriously, not get overboard, but take it seriously.
And what's the relevance of the photograph there with the
Love the
gangster
photograph.
shot?
Well, the photograph is there to illustrate and to make mockery of Ted Baillieu and of John Brumby, who both appeared carrying guns and whatever in some sort of Melbourne grammar dramatics, amateur dramatics. But what I think it best illustrates is this is the proof you need of this being a yin-yang election, where you can hardly distinguish between the two. They come from the same political class, they're both in the same private school, and I think the most shocking thing for Ted Baillieu about that photograph is that he'll be photographed with a cigar in his mouth.
All right, well, more about Victorian election later on, but Phil, in federal politics, and Andrew Wilkie has reminded the government of their wafer-thin existence.
Yes, of the fragility of minority government. Wilkie got a pledge out of Gillard in return for his support to do something about poker machines, something he cooked up with Nick Xenophon, and that was to, people could sit down and say in advance how much they're going to gamble or how long they're going to spend on the machine, this sort of opt-in technology to limit their losses. And like all these crackdowns, it's easier said than done. You get a lot of resistance from the states, and the clubs and society. There's a lot of revenue at stake, there's a lot of jobs at stake. Rudd pulled his punches on poker machines when someone told him there's 70,000 people get employed by them. The feds are running into the same level of resistance trying to put these in, and Wilkie's saying, well, if you don't do it, I'll take my bat and ball. He's not saying he's going to go to the other mob, but there's nowhere else to go to.
But Brian, too, isn't it? It just shows you how dangerous a promise it was to make in the first place when they may not be able to deliver. It's a state-controlled matter.
Well, that's precisely it. It's a state-controlled matter, and they could deliver it if they put bundles of money towards the states, which they don't want to do.
Well,
but look, it's not a real live threat. What he's saying is if they don't do it by 2014, I might not support you. Hello, there's an election before.
There won't be minority government.
Will Andrew Wilkie actually be returned? And B, will he hold the balance of power? Does it the threat matter one bit?
But still, it's the first time any of the independents have come out and done this. I mean, they pledges that they'd support them on supply and against no confidence motions, and they're free to go whatever they like and everything else. So this is now it's a threat. I mean, as I said, I don't think it'll happen in this term of government. They can probably drag it out.
And if it doesn't happen in this term of government, it doesn't matter after.
All right, the NATO conference is going on in Portugal, and they've set 2014 as a date for transfer of leadership, or as the Vice President of the United States, Joe Biden, put it overnight.
We had to say, look, you got to step up, man. Let me tell you, we're going to start. Daddy's going to start to take the training wheels off in next July. So you better practice riding.
It's not patronising at all, is it, to say Daddy's about to take the training wheels off?
Well, no, I think he's exposed the true problem there. That it's a problem of welfare dependency. It's 9 years since troops were there, and the government has not made any efforts, really, to look after itself. So he's saying the right thing. We're not staying here forever. Although if you listen to Julia Gillard, you might think that we were.
Brian, we will listen to Julia Gillard now. Phil Williams has interviewed Julia Gillard for News 24. Here's part of that.
This is going to be a conditions-based transition. It'll happen district by district, place by place. But here at this meeting this weekend, NATO, working with the partners more broadly, including Australia that support the International Security Assistance Force, have said that we can start transition in early 2011 and work through.
How do you cope emotionally when you hear the terrible news that an Australian soldier's been killed?
It's obviously terrible and devastating whenever we get news that one of our soldiers been killed or injured, and we've had that news far, far too many times, particularly this year.
Because it's a very, very difficult call for a Prime Minister, for a leader to make, isn't it? And you make decisions, they are, sadly, life and death decisions.
You're called on to make those decisions, but why are we in Afghanistan? Well, we've got to remember we are talking about a country in which terrorists were trained who came and took Australian lives. We lost Australians in 9/11. We lost over 100 Australians since in terrorist incidents, most particularly the Bali bombing, and many of those events had links to Afghanistan and training in Afghanistan.
Brian Toohey, she's resolute on the issue.
She's more resolute than most of the Conservative leaders in the world, those of Canada, Britain, Germany and Italy. Canada announced last Tuesday, or confirmed, Stephen Harper, the Conservative Prime Minister, that all combat troops would be out, Canadian combat troops out by next July. He is nothing about conditions-based or anything like that. It's date-based. And secondly, that they keep some trainers there, but they'd been moved from Kandahar, which he said explicitly was too dangerous, up to a base in Kabul, and all the training will be done exclusively in a classroom surrounded by barbed wire, and the trainers would not leave the base, not go outside the front base with the trainees,
and
because it's too dangerous.
There's no popular support for the war in Canada, though.
6% would have preferred the combat troops to stay. And the interesting thing for Julie Gillard...
But they've had 6 times more losses as well.
They've had 152 troops killed compared to 21 here. Well, the other thing, of course, is the problem of sovereignty, which in Lisbon, Julie Gillard did mention there is a problem about the sovereignty of the Afghan government, because if you keep saying, as she has repeatedly said, we won't necessarily leave in start leaving in 2014 because it's conditions-based. I will make the decision as to whether the Afghan forces are up to the job. And the Afghan government is increasingly saying, no, the forces are actually very unpopular here, we want you to pull back. And the General Petraeus, who has a lot of influence on Gillard, is reported as being very angry at that and astonished. What is astonishing is that a general should keep behaving as though you're heading an occupying force, needing to pay no regard at all to the wishes of a government, which may not be a very nice government.
That's hardly Petraeus' position, really. He's smarter than that.
That's what he said.
Infinitely smarter than that. I think the real problem here is that Julie Gillard's making the right noises if they were to come from the US president. That is the real centre of weakness. He's the one that said, we'll pull out from next year. I know he's since put on conditions on that, but Julia Gillard's position is the right one, but it's not being put by...
When is the last time an Australian Prime Minister had a tougher position than an American president on an overseas conflict?
It's very much in Australia's interest, strategic interest, to back Obama on this. What he said is dead right. America cannot afford to do another 10 years in Afghanistan. Gillard's saying we can. He is saying, I'm not going to spend another $1 trillion, and most people in America don't get the idea that their biggest problem by far is their economy, and it affects us, that their strategic strength around the world depends on their economy. He understands it.
When you say Julia Gillard has to back Obama's position on Afghanistan, which position are you talking about? Well, the initial one that said we're going to pull out from next year, the one that says, oh, look, actually there's conditionalities on that and blah, blah.
The one that he earlier this year...
have to move on.
Okay.
No,
he told the American people in an address to the American people, make no mistake, we will start pulling out next July. I can't see how we can get out of that.